In the late afternoon of Christmas Day, the Minnesota Vikings began their game against a hated rival, the New Orleans Saints, as they stubbornly pursued a Christmas miracle. The Saints opened on their own 25, but they didn't stay there for very long. New Orleans almost immediately found success running the ball. Latavius Murray, Emmanuel Sanders, and Alvin Kamara all picked up first downs on that opening drive. Minnesota's front seven were regularly out of position in the opening moments, which unfortunately was a trend that continued throughout the game. And on 1st and 40 from Minnesota's own, first and 10 rather, from Minnesota's 40-yard line, Drew Brees took the snap from under center and handed it off to Kamara. Minnesota's defensive tackles were washed out of the play, and the linebackers quickly found themselves wrestling with a blocker. Kamara exploded up the middle, defeating an arm tackle from Anthony Harris on the way to his first of 6 touchdowns on Christmas.
Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome to Notes from the North, the official podcast of the Vikings Gazette. We're proud to partner with Vikings Territory, Purple PTSD, and Purple Territory Radio. If you're looking for great Vikings coverage, be sure to stop by these sites, and you're always welcome at the Vikings Gazette. And with that being said, let's get to first down here. You thought it'd be good to talk about the New Orleans opening script, and it was pretty clear early on. It's going to be lots of running.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, New Orleans. So Sam and I are just talking about this, and I think you'll hear this reference. I'm not sure how many fans or casual fans would know this, but every offense pretty much will script their opening 15 or so plays. And I mean, the reason for that is really multiple. I mean, just keep in mind, every game obviously starts at 0-0. So it's not like you're in a situation where you have to throw the ball a lot, or you're trying to milk the clock and so you run the ball all the time or whatever. Like, there's no real circumstance that would dictate to you what you can run. And so offensive coordinators will plan the first 15 or so plays with basically various purposes in mind. There's a great article on a site called blitzology.com. And the person who writes this is a defensive-minded coach, but he reached out apparently to several offensive coordinators and offensive play callers and this kind of thing to see, what are you trying to get at in those opening 15 plays? And he categorized the responses he got fell into 5 main categories. So establishing an identity, whatever that is for your offense, diagnostic, plays that are scripted, he says, in order to diagnose some piece about the defense. So maybe you run a certain play, you want to see how a defense reacts. Okay, when we go and give them this look, how does defense respond? And then we're going to take in that information and then maybe plan to exploit that later on in the game. There's the designer category, which is a play that's specifically designed for that defense. We think that we can, this play is here because it's going to exploit this area of weakness. There's a catalyst category, which is a play that's designed to provoke a response from the defense. And then finally, there's the cumulative effect category, which he describes as plays that, throughout the game will really impact a defense. They'll have a cumulative effect, especially by the time you get to the third and fourth quarter. And so a lot of times what you're seeing is offensive coordinators, you're trying to gather information. You're trying to get the ball into your playmakers' hands. You're trying to see how the defense is going to respond. And you're trying to set yourself up for later on in the game. So you do these things, at the 10-minute mark in the first quarter because you have the 10-minute mark in the fourth quarter in mind, right? It's a chess match, right? And so it's interesting to see what a team comes up with their opening script at 15 plays. And in New Orleans, what they came up with, it wasn't particularly complex. There weren't, any crazy play fakes or trick plays or anything like that. It was Alvin Kamara up the middle, and with a lot of success. He had the 6 touchdowns, and the Vikings really didn't have much of an answer. Now, in fairness, those opening moments, Drew Brees did get Emmanuel Sanders involved, Jared Cook involved. There's a couple others as well. But really, this was about getting Alvin Kamara going and directly at those linebackers, directly at the defensive tackles, directly at the linebackers, and basically saying, can you stop us, right? And then the answer really then at the beginning and then throughout the game was no, they can't, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was clear very early on, running the ball up the middle, getting Kamara going, and that first touchdown. I don't know what the message was. And it was that I said to you. It was like, yeah, this isn't good. I think I said I predicted could be a 250-yard game. I don't think it was quite that much, but 6 touchdowns is I guess a fine alternative there too. It wasn't a whole lot of stopping Kamara.
No, it was. Yeah, the Vikings were overmatched basically in every way on defense, and it's unfortunate they didn't like. So I'm pretty sure it's Fritz Shurmur. I don't have this in the notes, but I should have had it. So Fritz Shurmur was a defensive coordinator in the NFL. He coached the Packers, and I'm pretty sure it's in one of his books where he talks about how there's an invisible string between a player's brain and their feet. The idea being that the more a player has to think, the slower their feet are going to go. And so if they're really trying to decipher on the fly, oh my gosh, what's the offense trying to do? They're going to be slower. Even if that player is extremely fast, it doesn't really matter. They're just because they're going to be indecisive and the plays happen so fast. Minnesota didn't really have that excuse in this past game. It wasn't like the Saints were doing anything complex, like Kamara up the middle, behind his guards, behind the center. There's really no reason to hesitate, to play slow. That invisible string connecting your brain and your feet really shouldn't have been an issue. The brain should be processing things pretty quickly and allowing you to react pretty quickly. But we were just outgunned. We just couldn't slow them down, unfortunately. And Drew Brees, I thought, didn't even play particularly well. But it was just the run game was so dominant for the Saints.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the thoughts I had. I think you get these older quarterbacks, and Brees obviously is on the tail end.
Yes.
I've seen people have said this might be it for him. I don't know. It feels like these guys always want to kind of go out until they can't until they're being dragged out in a wheelchair or something.
Yeah, right.
It's all about seeing how long they can go. And so I was like, you know what? If they can stop the run, they have a good chance. But it was very much they got the run established. There was just no stopping that. And once you had that, the passing lanes are open, and Brees, it similar to Trubisky last week, like it just looked easy.
Yes,
things were open, and it really wasn't challenging. And it's one of those things that obviously Brees played well, but how much credit do you give him versus how much is related to just how this defense is playing right now?
Yeah, I really don't think Brees looked particularly competent. Like, I don't think he looked great. He had a couple interceptions. There's a couple times where he was obviously nursing that rib injury. To me, this is a team that's vulnerable as they go into the playoffs. Now, the Minnesota Vikings are not a team that can exploit, those issues. But I do wonder about a team more competent than us who perhaps can, because I think that you did see, especially, the Vikings offense did play well. The defense played horribly, but the offense, all things considered, did play pretty well. And so I think that maybe going into the playoffs, I think Saints fans perhaps have reason to be concerned a little bit. Yeah,
it very much feels like there's not every team that is making the playoffs has holes. There's no ability to have a perfect team, I guess, but it is fascinating. It will be interesting to see. I think the last couple of weeks we've gotten a chance to see some of these teams that will likely be in the playoffs. The Saints for sure, the Bears to be determined, but it is fascinating to watch how your team plays against these teams, and then there's a chance that one of these teams just gets absolutely steamrolled by a team when they get to the playoffs, and it's like
exactly.
There's definitely some tiers right now, and unfortunately at this point, this Vikings team as it's currently constructed is a couple tiers below where they need to be a playoff team and to be able to contend.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, transitioning into the second down. You talked initially about the New Orleans opening script. I said to you quickly, like the Minnesota offense needs to be on, and their opening script was relatively impressive too.
Yeah, their opening drive was fantastic. Sam and I have talked about this. I've written about this at the Vikings Gazette. any number of Vikings fans or writers or whoever has talked about this. And I mean, I've bemoaned the fact that Gary Kubiak hasn't done a good enough job of getting his guys involved early. And I mean, that's one of the things that's diagnosed, or rather described on Blitzology with the opening script. A lot of times offensive coordinators are trying to get to the core of their identity, right? So who are you? What do you want to do? How do you succeed on offense? Okay, we want to do those things. And then you want to do those things by getting the ball into your playmakers' hands, right? And so the opening plays, that opening script, you featured Adam Thielen had a couple catches on the opening drive. Justin Jefferson picked up a first down. Tyler Conklin was targeted twice. The screen didn't work out, but he did pick up a first down later. And then Dalvin Cook had success. And he picked up a few first downs. He had a touchdown. So to me, I step back from that opening drive and say, okay, that is a smart way to start. From the opening, they opened with play action and then a bootleg past Adam Thielen for I think it was like 15 or 16 yards. Then they hit Jefferson and then they're rolling. I love it. And so the opening moments of the game, I think Sam knew it. I think I knew it. I think basically everyone knew who was watching. Minnesota's chance, they had a very small chance of winning this game. Minnesota's chance was to be dominant on offense, was to go kind of toe-to-toe and basically hope that you can keep it close. And then, something breaks your way, in the second half, and you end up stealing this game. That was their chance. And the offense, for the most part, played pretty well. They played well to start, I thought, and they played well throughout the game. But they just, boys, they just couldn't keep up.
No, and really, I was just calculating. I think that if you include the last drive, which is they were kneeling the ball, three drives that the Saints didn't score on. Yeah. So you can't, to keep up with that, you have to be basically unstoppable, basically perfect, and as tough. And you did mention earlier, but there was some plays, like you said, the defense was porous, but they needed to get some turnovers. And Harrison Hand did come up with a big INT there.
He did, right? And so I think, in life, as with football, a lot of times you're really just looking for a chance, right? Like, just give me a chance, and you're trying to make the most of it. Whatever that is, whatever profession or whatever opportunity, give me a chance. And Harrison Hand gave them a chance. He has been buried on the depth chart. He's a 5th round rookie, and even with all the injuries, his play time has been pretty limited. But he got that interception in the second quarter. There was around 5 or so minutes left. And at that time, it was a close game, right? It was 17-14. Harrison Hand gets an interception, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, after all of that, if the Vikings are smart with this and do things well, they could basically, run their 4-minute offense, drain the clock in the first half, and potentially go into the half, maybe up 21-14. That, to me, at that time, wasn't that unrealistic because the offense had played well up until that point. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, we might actually go into the half leading here. And more than just that, we begin the second half with the ball. So this is Minnesota's chance in many ways, I felt. But they gained 0 yards in that drive. And they took like less than 2 minutes. And then they punted the ball away. And then New Orleans scored. And it's 24-14 going into the half, rather than potentially 21-14, or maybe they don't get a touchdown, maybe they kick a field goal, 17-17. But that was a big moment. If there's one critique of the offense for that game, is that there were some critical moments where we really, really needed them to elevate. We really needed Gary Kubiak to pull out all the stops. Give me your best play call, whatever it is, make this happen. And I put this more on Kubiak than I do on Kirk Cousins at this point. And unfortunately, they didn't capitalize on that. What was really a pretty nice interception by Harrison Hand, especially given the context of, him being a rookie, not playing a lot. You're going against the all-time great. You're on the road. It's Christmas Day. Yada yada yada. He stepped up in a big moment, and it's unfortunate that the offense couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah. There's that drive. I was wondering if that was going to be your starting story, the interception that drive. And there's a lot of stories. I think that looking back, it's easy to look at that first drive and be like, this was a story that was just written from the start.
Yeah.
But for sure, at that point, it was like, okay, there's a chance here. And I think especially with momentum and the way it goes, to be able to capitalize on that and to go into the half, and even after the half, the third quarter, there was that drive too that just sputtered, and it was like these were your chances to get in. And by that point, the way the Saints were scoring, it was too late. So, briefly, I think that at this point, it's hard to talk about it a little bit, but the defensive performance.
Yeah.
What do you take from this?
Harrison Hand played pretty well. It was exciting to see Harrison Hand get a few snaps. It was nice to see him force that turnover. It was also nice to see, Hardy Nickerson Jr., one of their backup linebackers, he got a pick. That was more so, I would say, kind of lucky, right place, right time. But I'm not going to criticize the guy for that. He was in the right place at the right time, and so he deserves a certain amount of credit for getting that interception. But the defense, by and large, was awful. Just as bad as I've ever seen it in my lifetime. And that leads to a certain amount of kind of questioning for, where are things at with this team and where are things at with Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that as I was watching, I think one of the things I would hope for, and that gives me some hope as a fan that's not really a fan of this team, really, I think some of these guys normally wouldn't see the field nearly as much as they are. And this is very much it's a season that, looking back, you're not going to be able to take a whole lot from in terms of actual success. Like the record's going to be whatever, 7-9 or 6-10.
Yeah.
And that's disappointing. But to be able to give your depth some of these experiences and to go against some of these teams, I think for me, it's exciting. And I think that there's a chance for these players to develop. Losing, I think, sucks.
Yep.
It will, I think, bring some development for some of these guys, and when injuries come later down, they're going to be able to draw from this experience. But at this point, this defense is bad, and I think that you talked about Mike Zimmer, and just as we transition to this last down, the question is Mike Zimmer on the hot seat? Where are you at with that? What are your thoughts?
Personally, I don't think so. I don't think he'll be fired during the offseason. He just signed an extension, right, before the season began. Rick Spielman just signed an extension. Kirk Cousins signed an extension. And so over at the Vikings Gazette, so this is the leadership trinity. These three guys, your starting quarterback, your general manager, and your head coach, all signed extensions during the offseason. To me, I'm reading that. I was looking at those things and I'm saying, okay, this is the Wilfs, who are the owners of the Vikings. The Wilfs are saying, okay, the Vikings now have their window. We've married these three together. And if they basically can't get it done within these next couple years, 2-3 years, then we're going to start over, right? Because we're syncing up all their contracts, and we're going to allow them to kind of give this one final shot. But if it doesn't happen, then we're going in a new direction. And I think that's fair. But keep in mind, this is only year one of that window. And I get it. This is, I think, year 7 of Zimmer overall in Minnesota. And I think there's some frustration from the Vikings fans. And that's fair. We've had our fair share of ups and downs, mostly downs. But Zimmer, I think, is going to get another chance with this team. And I think he deserves it. My one concern, and I wrote about this a little bit yesterday, was, to me, it looked like the defense quit on Christmas Day. They were so awful. And I realize you get guys playing in roles that they shouldn't be in and all this stuff, but it just looked like they had no fight at all. All these missed tackles, poor angles, poor effort, brutal. And these are, like, I recognize that it's not going to happen this year, but Sam was just saying, we got young guys who are growing. If you're a young guy in the NFL, especially if you're not that first round pick, man, you're fighting for your future, right? This is an audition. You're putting stuff on tape, and if it doesn't work out for the Vikings, you're hoping that you still show something good so that another team will pick you up, right? and they looked so bad. So my one concern would be, has Zimmer lost this group? I don't think he has personally. I think this was just one awful game, and I think there are a number of factors why this game was awful. And that's not to say that the defense hasn't struggled before this. They have, but not to this degree. And so to me, this next game against Detroit is going to be really interesting, because if the Detroit Lions, with all of their issues, if the Detroit Lions run you out of town and the defense doesn't show up, then I think maybe you say, oh my gosh, maybe Zimmer's on the hot seat at that point. But I think at this stage, I think he's going to go into 2021 on a bit of a shaky foundation. I think he'll be given the chance to come back and get this thing going in the right direction in 2021. But if they don't do well next year, I think that's it for Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, I think that with coaching, you mentioned a couple of good things there. For sure, if a coach has lost the voice in the room,
yes,
that's an issue, and that's a space where obviously whoever's making that decision needs to have a pulse on the room and have an idea of what's happening and be able to figure that out. And I think that in some ways, I don't necessarily agree with leaving the decision in the players' hands, but talking to some of those leaders, you want for those leaders to have Zimmer's back.
Yes,
and you want them to know and believe that, hey, this is our guy.
Exactly.
Especially with the money that you've invested in some of these top guys. You want to know that they are committed to doing that, because there's a trickle-down effect. And so, for sure, at this point, that's the option I see with this team in terms of, if that's the issue, then he's gone. In terms of the performance, I don't think that you can necessarily do that. I think the coaches get a bad rap sometimes, where it's easy to dispose of a coach. It's easier to do that than cut all 53 players, or to cut everyone. And I think that the way the NFL is set up, it's a little bit easier to move on from guys than just with the way the contracts work than elsewhere. One of the questions I have for you with that is that I think that in some ways, and maybe you disagree, it would be better if the Vikings are going to move on him in the offseason versus 4 or 5 games into next season.
Yeah, certainly. I like. So let's say the Vikings start 1-5 again next year. So the Wilfs say to themselves, okay, we're going to give Zimmer a chance, but he's on a pretty short leash. And if they start 1-5 again, we're pulling the plug. If that's the case, then maybe it's better to do it now, like Sam was saying, because then at least you have the full off season to kind of get your coaching staff in place, implement the new vision. But I really just don't see that. Personally, I really like the Wilfs. I think they're good owners, and I think they consistently provide the finances. They can spend to the cap every single year, and they never get in the way. They can never get in the way of what Rick Spielman or Mike Zimmer want to do. They provide the resources. They let the football guys make the football decisions. And then they have provided incredible facilities. US Bank Stadium is beautiful. The training facilities are beautiful. And then from there, and then they also don't seem overly reactionary. Like, they don't seem to be kind of, I know a couple weeks ago I talked about not getting too high or too low. It doesn't seem that the Wilfs get too high or too low. They see kind of like the big vision, the big plan, and they kind of will see it through. And so to me, that would be surprising if that's where they were. If that's where they are, then man, they really need to seriously consider moving on from Zimmer at this point. But if that's not the case, and I don't think it is, because I think that to me, they're ideal owners. They provide resources, they buy into the vision, they're not overly reactionary. Man, what more can you ask for from your owners, right? And so I think that, especially since this offseason, the changes were so dramatic to the roster, so many players were cut. They had this 15-person draft class, which is, this roster is built in Mike Zimmer's image. Those 15 players were brought in because they were kind of to his specifications, to what they want to do on defense and on offense. So it would be very surprising to me if the Wilfs weren't at least willing to give it one more full year, right? And just because they've invested so heavily in constructing the roster in a certain way, and it's the way they've constructed it it's according to Mike Zimmer's plan and purpose. And so I think he'll have 2021. And I think that even if they go 1-5, I think he'll have 2021. It would take, to my mind at least, if they're 2-10, if they're 2-11, then at that point you probably pull the plug. But the season's shot at that point. The season's done. But I think that Zimmer's probably back, no matter what. But they do need to kind of evaluate the Detroit Lions game, and really see, are these guys, can Zimmer motivate these guys? Are they actually playing for their coach? And if they aren't, that's a big, big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like a meaningless game, but in many ways it's not. And,
exactly.
And here's a chance for them to do this and to finish the season strong. And I think that there's a space for momentum. I don't think you can really talk about the end of the game really drawing a whole lot for 7 months down the road. But I do think that being able to show and know that, hey, we can do this as a unit, especially with some of these younger guys, that's crucial. I do think, I agree. I think that at this point, if they make the decision to keep him, it's very much you have next season. And the NFL season is short. Like, it's wild how short it is. It's amazing how fast 16 games go, and how critical each and every game is. And even look at some of the starting games with the Vikings. If there was some winnable games there, and you can always look back and say, oh, if only. But there's a chance that we're talking about this a little differently. I don't think that we, at this point, what we've seen, that we're kind of hoping that the team makes the playoffs, in the sense that it's the week 16, week 17 Vikings are not in a great spot. But
no.
But yeah, I just wanted to note, because I think it's actually a really important thing that you mentioned about the owners, the Wilfs, because it is amazing how much for an ownership group, like, in a lot of ways you want the ownership group to be behind the scenes and not be vocal. You don't want them going down and giving interviews after the game and making comments, as we've seen with other teams. And it's that shall not be named. I think that it's really, to be able to have an ownership group that like you said, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, is in it with the team, believes in the team, has made a commitment. I think that is such a thing I don't think it's really talked about a whole lot in sports circles, but it is so critical to the foundation of a team to be able to have that type of backing, that type of support in that leadership position. It's huge. So that's a massive blessing for a sports team.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you almost like, it's like no news is good news. If you're not hearing about the owners and the owners aren't being talked about, unless it's them shelling out lots of good money and making good decisions, you don't really want to hear about the owners.
100%. I mean, they care deeply. They provide resources. They let the football guys do football things. Boys, that's all I could ask for. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, that's going to take us to the end of the breakdown of the game, unless you have anything else that you wanted to make a comment on.
No, I think that's all for me. And so let's hop into the odds and ends, and let's hear what's going on in the hockey world.
Yeah. So last week we talked a little preview on the World Juniors tournament that's happening right now. We're a few days in. It was fascinating because normally they start Boxing Day. This year they started Christmas Day, and so I know I was busy with different things. We were Zooming with family on Christmas Day, so I got to watch a little bit of sports here and there. But this World Juniors tournament is right in it. I guess we talked a decent amount about Rossi last week, and so he was held pointless in the 11-0 loss to the States. So that's a tough break. The States against Austria is just not a competitive match.
No,
that's a tough spot, and so I'm interested to see what Rossi has to do. The problem is they're in like the group of death. They've got such a difficult matchup, and so it's going to be difficult for him to really showcase his stuff. I mentioned last week, and I wanted to correct myself because I mentioned the relegation and that Austria was going for that, and there's actually no relegation this year, which is great for Austria in the sense that they won't have to worry about being eliminated. I think for fans, you're really just hoping that Rossi would have a chance I'm hoping for a couple big games against some of these lesser teams, and maybe even provide somewhat of a shocking result against against one of these teams that are a little bit more of a powerhouse. We saw last night that the Czech Republic beat Russia, and this is what I love about the tournament, is just these opportunities for some of these lesser, well-developed programs to take down some of these powerhouses. And not that the Czech is that far behind Russia, but it's definitely a surprise. So yeah, Rossi, Boldy had a hat trick in that 11-0 win, and he also had an assist in the 5-3 loss to Russia. So that was great. I think that what I've read, Boldy has definitely got some significant upside, and he's had a great year this year he's really taken his game to the next level, and so I think that's an exciting thing for fans. So Russia last night, as I mentioned, was held pointless, no goals, but Kostadinov had an assist in the 5-3 win over the States, and he was actually moved to the first line last night in that game, and so I think that's really encouraging from the second round pick this year to see that. And then Firstov and Novak have been held pointless so far. I just love this tournament. I think it's so great. Kyle, I know we've been talking about it, and it's just watching these teams. I would encourage people, if you get a chance to watch, especially the States. I think will be fun. I know a lot of the listeners come from there. But yeah, this is just such a great tournament.
It's bigger in Canada than it is in the States, which is a shame. Like it should have more attention elsewhere because it's so exciting. These are the best 18 and 19-year-old hockey players in the world, and they're all in the same spot competing for their countries. To me, in my mind, I think folks in the States get really up for March Madness because you get that youthful enthusiasm, right? Like you get this crazy energy and this effort, and there's just this awesome tournament. And I don't disagree with that. March Madness is great. But to me, this would be almost similar in the sense that you get this tournament of these kids and you get this energy. The World Juniors to me it's more exciting than March Madness because I'm a bigger hockey fan than basketball fan. But the energy, I think, is similar in my mind, at least. I think folks in the States would probably disagree, but to me, that would be my perspective. Now, the one thing I was wondering about Marco Rossi. So Sam's right. Like they're in the same division as Russia and the States and Finland. Oh boy, they're overmatched. Those matchups are worse than the Saints and Vikings on Christmas Day. And so, what does success look like for Marco Rossi? Is this like, to my mind, I look at that and say, okay, when you're on the power play, I want to see Marco Rossi looking dangerous. Like when he does have a little bit of room to operate, I want to make sure that the puck is on his stick and that he's looking crisp. What are you looking for? Because at this point, it's just so tough for him to stand out because his team him individually, he's a great player and he can compete with anybody. But his team as a whole is completely overmatched for the most part in that division.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those situations where I was realizing, it's difficult because, like I said, there's no relegation, so it's encouraging for them. But looking ahead, basically to next year, I don't know if he's going to be there. Like, I think Minnesota Wild fans are probably hoping that he is on the Wild roster and is contributing enough that he isn't at this tournament. And so a lot of this is about developing this team, and he's been named the captain. He's got this opportunity to lead, and for sure, whenever they get a power play chance, that's his time to shine. I think that the difficulty is that when you have these teams that have one superstar, it's difficult because the team can just hone in on that player and do that and just take him out of the equation.
Yeah, Vikings fans will remember what it was like when we just had Adrian Peterson in the offense and no quarterback and no wide receivers, and you had 8 and 9 men in the box. And so we can understand maybe what Marco Rossi's going through there.
Yeah, I was curious. I think at some point we'll have to talk about Peterson because certainly. As a fan, I always watched him and just was amazed at his ability. I'm sure in some ways those are fun years, and in other ways, like you said, having a one-dimensional team is tough. But I think with Rossi, what I was going to say is just it's very much about not that you have to question his compete level, but very much about showing this team, and this team is basically at this point fighting to figure out how they can stay in this tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
past this year, and so giving them the opportunity. Not that he's teaching them, but in a sense, just leading by example in the way that he's playing, and the way that he's helping the team grow and figure out how to play against some of these greater teams that they're playing. It is very much, you've got the 5 countries of Canada and Russia and Finland and Sweden and the US, and they've won each at different points over the last several years, and that's a lot of fun. I think that's really fun to watch different countries compete. But yeah, I'm excited. I want to watch more of Rossi and just see what he does. But it's been difficult. He hasn't played a whole lot this year. Like the OHL stopped in the Canadian Hockey League. It stopped back in March, and he got a game earlier this year. I think he played 1 game, and then he's now he's at this tournament, and you can see with some of these teams that some of these guys haven't played any meaningful hockey for several months, and so that's a difficult spot to be in.
For sure.
So yeah, anyways, hope for him is that gets a chance to get the motor going, and then whatever ends up happening, whether, like I said, he ends up on the Wild or not, and is able to play in a different league this year. I think this is a neat chance, and it's always fun to play for your country.
Certainly.
Yeah. Good. Well, I don't know if you have any words of wisdom for us.
So my word of wisdom for this week is coming from my own devotional, similar to last week with Ecclesiastes. Because it's Christmas, I was reading the opening of Luke's Gospel. And I was reading about Simeon, who, according to the Bible, was a righteous and devout man who was waiting for the consolation of Israel. So here was a dude who loved the Lord, feared God, and was waiting for the Messiah to arrive. So Christmas, in many ways, is a time of anticipation and longing, waiting and hoping, that kind of thing. And that was certainly true for Simeon. And I know it's a little bit of apples and oranges. We're talking about, the Savior of the world and a Super Bowl. So there's a bit of a discrepancy, I suppose, between the two things we're talking about. But I think, this Christmas season, Vikings fans, Sam and I would think that everyone should be longing and waiting for Christ's second return. But, or I guess return, second arrival. But I think that for Vikings fans, it's okay to long and to wait and to anticipate our chance in this Christmas season. Someday it's going to arrive. Someday we're going to get our shot. Boys, it's not going to be this year. We saw that definitively on Christmas Day. But keep longing, keep waiting, keep hoping. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
2022, right?
Yeah, 2021. Come on.
Well, isn't it? I was going to say, I guess it's the 2021. I was thinking the 2021-2022 season.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, we'll say it'll be the 2021 season, but they'll officially hoist that Super Bowl, hold it up in the air in February 2022.
So it's always weird. Like to have a season that splits. Like in most leagues, that's what happens. Yeah. But I feel like the NFL, you get the bulk of the year in the one year, and then you've got just the playoffs and after the new year. But anyways, we want to thank people for listening. We've been really encouraged to see the numbers that we've gotten so far, and we really hope that people continue to listen. And as we figure stuff out, we're definitely growing, learning, anticipating, and hoping that as time goes on, that we just continue to get better and better at this. And I know Kyle has put in tireless work, effortlessly. But he, anyways, we're just super thrilled that people are listening, and we hope that people continue. So be sure to stop by VikingsGazette.com for great Minnesota Vikings news. And actually, I was just thinking as we were closing, you wrote an article, Christmas, just preceding Christmas there, about our top 3 Christmas movies and Christmas foods and Christmas songs. And I hope, I don't know how I'm looking coming out of that. And I know that you may feel similarly. I know my wife had some comments for me. I'm glad to engage in those conversations with people if they have any questions. I think that the one thing I was going to say is, like, I mentioned that gravy is not a food. I think it's a condiment. Like, you don't consider ketchup on your burger a food option. So that was a disagreement me and Kyle had. I don't know
For sure, we did.
You wanted to have a rebuttal on that.
I did, yeah. It's for sure a food, and I think I compared it to the offensive line. I think I said turkey is the quarterback, but gravy is the offense. The gravy is what makes the turkey really work because it's a dry meat. See, no, it's for sure a food. You need the gravy.
Yeah. I think it's a condiment. I guess I can understand what you're saying, but yeah. Anyways, there's some good stuff there, and I revealed a secret that my love for the Hallmark movies and such. Although I will say there's been a few that I've turned on this year because they've just pumped out a ton of them this year.
Yeah.
And some of them are just bad, and it's one of those things where you look at it and it's like, do I turn it off? And for me, unless a movie is like absolutely awful, I try to finish it. And so anyways, I think that you also have to figure out, for me, it's about what's the purpose of a movie, and at times, oftentimes, because my mind is going so much, I just want a simple movie that I know the ending and it makes me feel happy inside, and that's where I'm at. And so I don't think you're getting that high action-packed thriller from many Christmas movies, and I'm totally okay with that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So we can be found on Twitter and on Facebook at Vikings Gazette. And I personally, Sam, can be found at SamAllison98 on Twitter. Anyways, thanks so much for listening, and we will talk with you all next week as we talk about the last game of the season.